Hi everybody, it's Mark Hanna with Wisdom Gaming. A little bit late today on my weekly dose of ASL number 7. It's actually Monday morning at 5. Last week I was just too slammed to get to the videos, but here I am, unapologetic, unscripted, psychologically immune to social media scoring, as ever, Grecian formula. So here we are, and we're going to talk about VBM, Vehicle Bypass Movement. And some are going to probably call me setting up some grudge rules for VBM. Look, actually, I have no grudges with VBM. If you're not sure what VBM is, I'm sure there's 6 or 7 training videos out there from various channels. Go find one, and they'll teach you all about vehicle bypass movement and how intrinsically important it is for playing ASL with vehicles. You can't really get by without it. Scenarios are set up an expectation that you'll use it. If you don't use it, you will probably lose the scenario. If it's a key situation, you really just can't use your vehicles to park up, blast away, and use them to reduce the enemy. You've got to use them tactically in combat. They don't give you enough turns to soften up the enemy in this game. It's not really part of most of the scenarios in the modern day. So it's a really funny thing, this VBM, because if you look at the rule here, there's only one small little rule: target selection limits. Uh, Now, this is the rule that is actually the VBM rule. A unit does not have the freedom to attack units in other locations while its own location is occupied by a known enemy unit. And the known enemy unit we're talking about here is going to be a vehicle, unless the only known enemy unit in its location is an unarmored vehicle, which is like something you never do. You would never try to run a truck into an enemy unit's hex unless you're absolutely desperate. So the main rule is this: whenever a unit is eligible for triple point blank fire versus known enemy units, it can only attack those units. So the trick is, even though a tank is immune to most inherent fire, you just move a tank in vehicle bypass movement. Why vehicle bypass movement? Well, because it's a lot safer than trying to drive into, for example, the woods hex, or especially a building hex. Aside from the dangers of bog, you also have cellars for buildings that you could fall into. And generally speaking, it's not a good idea to be bogged in a hex with enemy infantry because you get a -1 on you versus the CC attack that comes at you. So instead of risking that, we have this technique of vehicle bypass movement where you come in and bypass and stay in motion, thereby netting a +2 DRM for being in motion during any CC attacks versus you. However, because you're still in the enemy's hex, the infantry can't shoot out. This will allow you to move infantry up next to the tank, rescue it, blast any defenders who might still be in the hex. There's a number of articles that are out there on tactics to deal with vehicle bypass movement because it's pervasive in the game. Okay, so you basically have 2 choices. Either you try to leave residual firepower as the tank is trying to drive in. You suspect the tank will be driving in, so you fire at it and maybe spray fire so you can leave some residual firepower in a couple of different hexes. In the event the infantry tries to come up and rescue the tank. The other technique is to wait for the tank to come in and try to close combat and destroy it. Depending on the nature of the units that you have that are receiving the tank visitor, it will sometimes behoove you to try one technique over the other. Okay, so that's an accepted rule. I don't actually have a problem with it. It's built into the game, so each side can do it. It's not like the prisoner exchange if you're Russians, where you play past the prisoner and deploy a bunch of squads that you normally would not be allowed to do. That's a very cheap way to and cheesy way to make half squads if you're a Russian player. Not specifically disallowed by the rules because the prisoner rules are just poorly written. That's no excuse to engage in the tactic. But VBM is legit. The problem is how realistic is vehicle bypass movement? If you think about combat in World War II, do you ever think of a tank commander saying, sidle in on this building, stay in motion to keep yourself relatively safe, even though we won't be able to fire worth a damn at the guys inside the building? And that way our infantry can come up behind us and take out the enemy. You ready to do that? Yeah? You ready to do that? Here's Monty getting ready to do that. This is a tactic that's embedded in the game, but it's the most crazy, unrealistic rule you could ever think of. Tanks didn't do that. They might come in and blast through the building. There's tales of tanks pulling up, stopping, and blasting into a window at point blank range. That would be probably at 5 yards away. But in ASL, you can't do that. Because in ASL, what you have to do is stop 40 meters away so you can get the point blank modifier. If you try to get any closer, which tanks did, they would get closer. You get an extra +2 for firing within the hex instead of a -2 for point blank fire. So this discourages tanks from going into the hex, except for vehicle bypass movement. Or overrunning out in the open. And there's another thing we need to talk about with respect to overruns in the open, but that's a different situation, so we're going to stay away from that for here. So, somebody tried to fix this when they did the Denant module, bless them. They put this rule in Denant Special Rule 11. Vehicles and enemy units. A vehicle may not voluntarily end its movement phase or attempt ESB in the same hex as an unbroken enemy infantry unit. Or it actually may do it, only if the following apply. But if you look at the applications here, they're actually pretty rare. These aren't things you normally would find, and it certainly disallows. The whole purpose of the rule is to disallow vehicle bypass freeze. That's what it's for. It doesn't say that. 7.212 doesn't talk about VBM freeze. DN11 doesn't talk about VBM freeze. VBM freeze is a gamer's term for this gimmicky behavior of tanks. Now, interestingly, the designers of Denant thought they needed to explain away this problem of why they fixed the rule set here. And as they have this convoluted explanation. It's right down here. I'll read it to you. Vehicles and enemy units, each side had periods of virtually unopposed armor without being able to take full advantage of that fact. Oh, is that right? I'd like to see the citation that says that. Okay. That sounds like an opinion to me. However, let's continue. This deviation from the standard rule is intended to account for that. Extensive playtesting repeatedly revealed that without this special rule, the side with unopposed armor, unlike historically, was virtually unstoppable. Now, I don't know where they get this unlike historically idea that unopposed armor was virtually unstoppable. Unopposed means that you're not trying to stop something from happening. So, I'm sorry, but this is really bad use of English at best. It doesn't make sense what they're saying here. It's a hand-waving argument to explain why vehicle bypass movement has been removed from the module. Now, I can believe that when they play tested it, the side that had a lot of tanks, if that's the tactic they were engaging in, because that's what ASL rules encourage you to do, it was probably causing the other side to lose because their infantry would be frozen. They couldn't fire out of the hex, a bunch of German infantry to run up the hills in the open, immune to fire because of the vehicle bypass provisions. And that's why they say this: without this special rule, the plentiful German armor in the game was entirely too powerful, ruining the experience. Okay, so let me explain something to you. Vehicle bypass movement already ruins the experience. The problem is it's part of the experience, so we all have to deal with it when we play with tanks. I was playing a scenario with a guy the other day, and what it turned out was that the most logical solution for me to try to crack his defense, which was considerable and actually very well prepared, was for me to use vehicle bypass movement with all the plethora of tanks that I had, keep his infantry from shooting out at me. He would try to put residual firepower out there. I'd be deploying smoke to try to keep him from doing that any effect on me. And then I'd run my infantry up and then twinkle him out of the position, either by voluntarily breaking because he knew he was toast with a flamethrower next to him. But the tanks weren't being used because you're using a Stooge G3, which has no turret covered arc, has the same vehicle bypass movement properties as a regular tank in motion. It's can't even shoot at the guys. You have to sidle up, and the tank is facing this way. The building's over there. Okay, but that's what we're doing. That's what I was doing. And I just realized at that point, I kept doing this to him. And I said, you know what? This scenario sucks. And I said, I can't stand using VBM against you with these stooges everywhere I go, as it's the only feasible way to protect my troops from getting blasted. And he understood. I surrendered the scenario, let him take the win. And I shook my head. I said, you know what? VBM, in combination with skulking, is ruining this tremendous game. Somebody has to address this. Now, I want to congratulate the guys that did this Denant module for at least giving it a try. At least they tried to do something about it. I do believe it does ruin the experience, not just in the Denant module, but all over the place. Anyway, finishing this SSR Note 5, the last statement here. Other less drastic measures were considered, but discarded as insufficient or too convoluted. Now, I don't know what measures were considered. I'd actually be interested to find out what those measures were that were considered to be too convoluted. If anybody has played vehicle bypass movement and tried to figure out exactly what's going on, what you can do if you CE your tank or your half-track, and what you can't do if you don't, how it affects units on different levels if you do or you don't. Anybody who's looked at the convolutions involved from Rule 7.212 and associated rules related to triple point-blank fire would find it reasonably convoluted enough. That's why VBM is such a annoying topic to deal with. I can't imagine that it would be impossible to figure out a way to fix this. And in fact, that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm not going to try to do it in this particular diatribe or rant or whatever you want to call it. This is just simply a heads up that it's let me start that comment again. Here what we have is an embedded rule since 1989 or whenever ASL came out. The ramifications of this rule I don't think were clear for a number of years, and as time went on, people started to hone their tactics with tanks and improve them and so forth. And then VBM became the norm. It's affected scenario design ever since. Now that we have thousands of scenarios, we can't take it back. we could put it in as they've done in the denom module as an SSR. We can always do that. But, and people might call it a grudge rule because it doesn't agree with the mainstream rules of ASL. Well, that's fine. Actually, why don't we just call it a rule that fixes something that's broken? That's what it would be. So when I get around to figuring that out and how that might work, I'll let you know. So I would combine this with the command control rules. Reference my last ASL weekly dose of ASL. I talked about command control, broken, VBM, broken, skulking, broken. Three things that could be addressed to make ASL a much better experience. Already a great experience. If I didn't think it was, I wouldn't be doing this video. So thanks for listening. Tap the like if you liked it. If you didn't like it, thanks for listening all the way through. Have a great week, and I'll try to get you another video here in a couple days. Bye.